is the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. And Ian, another great day to be a Beaver. There's a lot to talk about playoff-wise and a lot to talk about with epic comebacks again. There's just a whole ton of stuff that we could talk about. First off, how are you? And you have Thanksgiving coming up this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. All things considered, it's going pretty well. Beaver Sports is up. I'm up. Only thing that's down is, of course, the Chargers. But I think we're done with them this year.
Well, look on the bright side. You've already at least everybody's kind of cemented that Staley is a lame duck kind of at this point.
Right. Yeah, and this is kind of the exact reason that we created. Obviously, it's good for the podcast to have its own Twitter or X page, but trying to tell people to follow me on X to get their podcast information, and then also having Sundays be me just cursing, the Chargers and all that. So I apologize to anybody that does follow the my personal Twitter account, because I'm sure you saw plenty of that just unloading. But in terms of the Beavers, though, it was I think it was a phenomenal weekend. I mean, you can ask for a little bit better, obviously, but I'm not disappointed at all with how every sporting event went over the past week or so, that we've had to digest all the sports information.
For where things sit at this point in the year, being at the Thanksgiving week, and that we still have two different fall sports to talk about is pretty darn cool, and a really good spot of where Beaver Athletics is at right now. And it's really, really fun. So let's start off talking about Bemidji State football. Ian, a couple weeks ago, it was, Augustana was a tough pill to swallow, and you just squeaked into the tournament. And, this team was a little shaky, or at least in that last game, and just kind of were things trending in the right direction heading into the postseason? And apparently, yes, because they played the game of their lives, especially on defense, in that game against Texas Permian Basin. Bemidji State, we had that podcast where we talked with Bolte, and we said, does this motivate you guys a little bit? Does this barely getting in? And even on the broadcast of the D2 selection show, they're like, I didn't think Bemidji State would get in, but they did. If that motivated anybody. And he said the right thing as coach. He's like, no, we're motivated all the time. We're ready to do what we need to do. But Ian, I got to think that played a little part in it, right? Because we talked about before we hit record, it's the game share moment where it's the meme of the guy kind of slouched over playing video games, and he sits up or the other way around, where he's all right, it's a little casual. Okay, it's game time. We're gonna lock this thing in here. And that's what Bemidji State football did. Texas Permian Basin was a top 4 offense in Division II. I think top 4, top 3, whatever that was good offense in Division II. We went through their schedule and we saw they're just blowing everybody out of the water. And Bemidji State held them to 3 points. Amazing. Ian, I know you were able to watch the game because you paid the money, because the NCAA is a joke. Why are we paying?
Yeah.
It has to be an NCAA thing, because these games were free for Bemidji State up until this point, and then they get to the playoffs. Same thing with women's soccer, that we have to pay $11 to watch a game that we've been watching for free all season long, or whatever it was. It's ridiculous. But Ian, you were able to watch the game. What were your observations, as I was only listening on the Beaver Radio Network call?
Yeah, I want to apologize to everybody. Like we said, last year the playoff game on the road in Angelo was free, and so I kind of expected that to be the same. And heads up, I'm looking at the little watch button by the game against Central Washington. It's got a dollar sign by it. So
why?
even at home. But hey, damn it. If you're gonna have to pay for it anyways, you better go to the Chet and watch it. Bundle up.
You might as well.
You live in Bemidji, you live in Minnesota, you've got the warm gear.
It's still warmer than last year's home playoff game.
It's gonna be. I was at last year's home playoff game. That's what my mom and my buddy has been telling me. He's like, "Oh, dude, it's gonna be freezing." I'm like, "Dude, we were there last year. It's probably gonna be 30 degrees warmer this year than it was last year. So you can buck up." And yeah, we're still trying to figure out a way to get up for that. But it was a shocking game. I want to apologize to any negative comment that I've ever made or insinuated about the Bemidji State defense, because I think I had said that they had allowed like 50 points, or they scored like 50 points a game last week, because that's what it said on the conference website. I don't know if there's a game in there that doesn't count, because the broadcast guys for UT Permian Basin were talking that they had scored like 43 points a game over the regular season, which is still astronomical. And to be held to 3 points by this Beavers defense, I mean, talk about showing up and showing out. That was phenomenal, just phenomenal. I mean, the defensive line was just bullying their offensive front all day. There was really no explosive plays, minus a couple of passes that it's just like, how did he even toe tap that on the sidelines? And, it's not really to any fault of the coverage. They had a decent coverage, and the quarterback rolls out the one time that he escapes the pressure and makes the throw down the sideline. It's a crazy catch, but then they come back and they get another sack or another big negative run or something. And man, it was a crazy game defensively. And offensively, I mean, you only see 10 points on the scoreboard, but I think that most of that is just due to red zone struggles, short run game struggles. I mean, it's crazy. The Beavers get in the short running downs and they can't do it. It's just weird. Like, they run the ball well on first down, they get 6-7 yards and create a second and manageable. They got down there on the goal line and they just could not punch it in. They had 3 red zone trips and 3 trips, I believe, inside the 5. Maybe at least 2 of those were for sure inside the 5. And they come out with 10 points. But for the most of the game, they were moving the ball well still. So the offense was still moving, even though you see that 10 points. It wasn't I'm trying to get away from using the Chargers as a base, but like, if you watch that horrible Monday Night Football game a couple weeks ago where the Jets defense just like smothered them, it wasn't like that. The Beavers were moving the ball the whole game, and it just didn't always translate into points. So I thought that this could have been a little bit more lopsided. And then, they get the field goal down towards the end of the game. That's the only points they got. And it was really kind of just because the Beavers were like, all right, we're not going to get beat deep here. We are not going to give up a big play and let you back into this game with still like 5 minutes to go. If you're going to score on us, it's going to be under a minute to play. You're going to have to convert the onside kick and get another touchdown. And the Hands team came out and jumped on the ball, and it was no big deal. The game was over. So credit to the Beavers all around. Coaching was great. There was no big situational lapses other than one. I can't remember if it was a high snap or a low snap. I believe it was a low snap. It was one of those plays inside the 5-yard line and I think Ali Muhammad was in the backfield. They kind of just had to fall on it, save face, make sure you don't turn the ball over there inside the 5. But other than that, most of it was just, business as usual. Punting went pretty well. They missed a field goal, I think, in the first half from a pretty short distance, and then
Texas Permian Basin you're talking about?
No, Bemidji.
Bemidji
and then there was a penalty on the play or something, and it gave them a first down or it gave them, an extra try at the field goal. And then I think they knocked it through, I think is what happened there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it was really buttoned up, and the defense, I mean, if the defense plays like that every game, and I'm not saying that they will, because that was probably like a 1 in 100 game. I'm not saying they can't play like that, but that was incredible.
But like in that situation against that good of a team, you know what I mean? I get what you're saying.
Right. You don't expect 3 points from an offense that good. You're expecting kind of to win maybe a lower scoring game, like 24-20 or something, but 10-3, that was a little bit shocking to see. But either way, I mean, just hats off to the defense. They played out of their minds.
I mean, well, it's like you said, like they're into that matchup, and it's like you're in a boxing match, and the guy you're facing, you're like, this guy can hit. I know he can get a swing on me. He's going to land a couple punches. I need to be ready for it and be ready to take it. And you just never get that punch that really kind of hits you. And that's where Bemidji State was at. And taking a look at kind of the quickie stats as this game wraps up, I mean, this is really kind of the part because, in total yards, Bemidji State was outgained. Texas Permian Basin at 264 to Bemidji State's 220. The passing yards are pretty much even. Texas Permian Basin ran for 111 yards to the nice figure Bemidji State had with their total numbers. Texas Permian Basin had 10 penalties that ended up being 59 yards, 4 penalties for 45 yards for the Beavers. Permian Basin had a couple more first downs than Bemidji. They were 6 for 19 on third downs. Was Texas Permian Basin. Bemidji State 5 for 15 on third down. And fourth downs, Texas Permian Basin was 5 of 6. But I think it kind of gets to what you're talking about, Ian, with like that final drive of that whole defense is like, you may get a bunch of yards, but we are going to, bend but don't break is kind of the term that gets thrown around, I think, a little too loose sometimes. But it's kind of just that, you know what, like, you're going to get down the field, but we dare you to like finish it. And to go to another NFL example, like in the NFL, defenses are like that more and more, where it's like, we're going to force you like to actually put a drive together. You're not going to beat us deep over the top. You're not going to get a big play. You're going to have to like sit there and be patient and be willing to eat a long drive. And teams, and especially when you get to college, some of these guys just aren't willing to do that, especially when you're an offense like Permian Basin that's used to scoring a lot of points. You're not willing to be patient and take the stuff. You want to get that big play and the big rip, and you want to do all this stuff. And Bemidji State was able to, even though they got outbeaten yards and time of possession and first downs, they still were able to get the key points, the timely things that ended up going in their favor. And look, I'm not saying that it's a sustainable way to play, getting outgained, but also the defense played well enough where it didn't really matter. And it's just a really, really awesome that they got to win this game. And it's great because Texas Permian Basin was a team that came in ranked 10th in the country. Bemidji State on highest ranks was ranked 15th, as low as 21. Texas Permian Basin ranked as low as 12th. So this was, by all intents and purposes, an upset. And this was a game where, Bemidji State's been ranked that high before at some point in the season. So it's not shocking that this win happened. But for everything kind of in the last couple weeks, with the Augustana game, and had a chance to win the NSIC and get that home playoff game, it felt like it was an opportunity that slipped through. And we talked about it when we did the live broadcast at the selection show. We're like, well, don't get to have another game at the Chet, but you still got in the tournament. Ian, they get to have another game at the Chet. They won and got the upset. And also Central Washington University got the upset. And I can't remember who they played in that first round.
Western Colorado Austin Eckler's. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't remember what their actual, but they got the
Austin
upset
Eckler's. Is that where did he go to college?
That's where he went to school, yeah.
Oh,
so my plan was, if they were to win, we were going to get Austin Eckler on the pod. So I'm sorry, everybody, but it just didn't work out.
He's just a little too discrontled.
Fumbling inside it. Speaking of fumbling inside the 10-yard line, moving on. But yeah, I mean, Bemidji State gets to have not just a game at the Chet, but a second round playoff game at the Chet. This is the latest home game in Bemidji State history for the football program. The Chet has never had a game on Thanksgiving week or post-Thanksgiving. It's really, really cool, which is why you should go to the game if you're able to, and get to be a part of that history and get to be a part of a crowd. I know it's Thanksgiving week. I know the students might not all be there. They might not all come back early and enjoy this game, because it's going to be awesome. Because the Chet's been a great atmosphere all year long. Central Washington is a team that probably knows how to play in the cold a little bit, but the cold and the winds of Bemidji helping out a little bit. And just to get that game at home and to not have to fly down to Texas or fly out to Washington. Because the process for this game, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, because both teams were unseeded, the NCAA had to kind of get back together and decide who the home games should go to. Yeah, so that's kind of what the discussion was. As the games were going on and you're watching the bracket play out, you're looking at Central Washington, and you kind of expected Western Colorado to be able to pull away from them, and it just wasn't happening. And Central Washington, I believe, had a lead at one point in that game in the third quarter. And yeah, I think it just came down to the fact that both teams were unseeded, and the NCAA then had to have a meeting and decide, because obviously, you get sent wherever you're sent for geographical purposes. And so they determined that the Beavers had, I guess, a better season in the regular season. And I guess, 8-2 compared to 7-3 kind of speaks for itself, but there's strength of schedule that goes into that. And yeah, it was kind of exciting because the Beavers had the game in hand, or so you thought. And I was just sitting there watching the live stat ticker for the Central Washington, Western Colorado game. Central Washington down 3 at the end of the game. They're driving. They get inside the 10-yard line, and there's just not enough time left. So the kick, they make the field goal, send it to overtime. They force Western Colorado to kick a field goal in the first possession, and then I think it was like the second or third play, they go straight to the end zone for a touchdown and upset Western Colorado. So, yeah, they had to come down to a meeting, and it was determined that the Beavers had the home game. And I think this is, like you said, we talked about it. It's a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because you get the home game. Sure. If you win that game against Augustana, there's benefits. It's a 9-win season. You go 9-1.
You get to hang the banner.
You win the NSIC outright because of the Mankato loss to Duluth. So there are big benefits to it. Trust me, I understand that. But at the same time, you would have been the 4 seed, most likely. Permian Basin would have been the 3 still. You would have been the 4 where Augustana was, and you would have had one of Augustana or Mankato come to your home field to play you.
Probably Mankato, based on the way Bolte kind of talked about how the NCAA doesn't want to have teams play each other back-to-back. So you're hosting in a revenge game, and Bemidji State could have won, but there's no guarantee they would have won that game. Yeah.
Yep, they absolutely could have won that game, but it's a team that's already beaten you. They're going to come in. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder because they just lost, right? Now you get to go to Texas. You get to play in I think it was about 50 degrees, 55 degrees, whatever it was.
And a team that knows nothing about you, by the way. So they don't know your tendencies and they don't know whatever. And it's a blank slate versus a team like Mankato that you just know each other.
And now you get to host the home playoff game. Now, granted, it might not have worked out like that, but because of Central Washington's win over Western Colorado, you get to host the playoff game, not in the first round, but in the second round. And you get to avoid for at least another week, perhaps, the number 1 overall team in the country in the Colorado School of Mines, who has been dominating teams all season long. So we'll see what happens with that. And I don't think, like we talked about, the Beavers aren't going to shy away from that challenge if that's what ends up happening in the quarterfinal. But just being able to get another game deeper into the tournament before you have to face them, get a little bit more momentum built up. Maybe they pick up a few little bruises here and there. And that's sort of, exciting for the Beavers and be able to take care of business. I think this is their first win ever. I have no idea if that's got any merit to it, but I think somebody said it's their first win ever against a team not in the Northern Sun, but there's a lot
of they beat Washburn in the Mineral Water Bowl in 2016.
In the Mineral, okay, yeah. That was a comment that I saw in that. Respect the Mineral Water Bowl. That's right.
Hey, respect. My first year on campus, they won the Mineral Water Bowl. That was don't disrespect the work that Coach Hine and them did. Remember, Jordan Hine was the quarterback at that time, and they got their first postseason win. So put some respect on the Mineral Water Bowl's name because it's that perfect Midwestern bowl game kind of name. Bemidji State won that against Washburn, and that's technically a postseason game because it's after the regular season, but a playoff game. The first playoff game, NCAA Division II tournament win that they've had outside the NSIC. Because, outside of that, unless they've played some other non-conference team before, which, again, don't really believe they have. So that's the cool part about this. Bemidji State is the only team currently in college football to have won their first round playoff game 3 years in a row.
Any playoff game, I believe.
Right.
Or is it just first round?
I think it's first round because I think there's a couple teams that have, but they've had first round buys. So I think that kind of excludes them from the first round win because they technically didn't play in the first round. But either way, there's 16 teams remaining. If Bemidji State wins, they have a chance to get down to the Final 8, which, again, has never happened in school history. It's not all uncharted territory because Bemidji State, they went to, where'd they go a couple years ago? Was it School of Mines in 2021? And then last year they went to Angelo State. So, there's been some charted territory before going into that second round. But in terms of getting to host a second round playoff game, never been there before. Getting a chance to play into December for a college football team in Division II, something that's never happened before. And that's something that's really cool. And they have a chance to do something that no team has ever done before. And there were points in the season where, they were playing well. Obviously, we're not saying that they were playing bad football, but it's okay, well, to get where they want to go, can they do it with, this thing happened in this game and this thing happened in this game? Is it possible? Because we already knew that they were good enough and they were good enough to get into the tournament and be towards the top of the conference. But can they go on a run in the tournament? Because that's where they've set the bar because they've played so well. And we were, throughout the season, it's just here or there. I don't know. Here I see it, here I don't. And we're seeing it kind of come together. And sometimes you have to be more lucky than good. Bemidji State was good in winning that first round game. Lucky in terms of the team that was ranked higher than you got upset. And now you get to host. And that's something that you have to take advantage of. I know obviously that's something that Coach Bolte and company are going to be very excited about is getting to host that second round playoff game. Really, one last thing before we kind of touch up here on the game against Permian Basin, because we do, Ian, have another football related podcast, an interview podcast kind of lined up for later in the week. So again, be listening to that, because that's going to be taking place, and we're kind of go a little bit more in depth about the game ahead on that. But let's go over a couple big plays in that game, Ian, that kind of shifted this thing. Permian Basin had a chance to kick a field goal early in the game. Believe it was in the first half, and Bemidji State was able to get I believe it was a block by Marco Calvaro, getting the block for the Bemidji State special teams, with the ball placed at like the 30, which isn't like an automatic make for Division II college football, but also like decent enough field goal range early in the fourth quarter. We have a pass tipped by Princeton Harris, intercepted by Caleb Young, that kind of gets things big and towards the end of the game. I mean, it's there's a lot of things that went right. Marcus Hansen, NSIC Defensive Player of the Year, talking about the game plan was simple. We are going to go out and play with violence, and that's what we did. He led the Beavers with 8 tackles in the game. Like, everything just kind of came together, and a special teams unit that, again, has had throughout the season, it's just had some ups and downs, to be able to come up with a big play in that moment for the defense to get the turnovers that they needed. I know they could have scored more points on offense, but theoretically you could say that about any game. They scored enough points to win. Their defense played great. Their special teams came up with the timely plays. And really, why not us at this point?
Yeah. And I have one other thing I want to touch on. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on football, and maybe rightfully so. They have showed up. But the broadcast team for Permian Basin made a comment about this kind of into the second half, and it probably reigned really true, and it's something that is beneficial to Bemidji State making the playoffs and advancing yet again in the playoffs, is experience and being in the playoffs. And they said it looks like Permian Basin has never been there before, and they hadn't. And it was their first time.
Head coach was in his second year.
Yep, it's their first time winning the conference ever. They were projected to finish 7th in the Lone Star Conference going into into this season, and they kind of came up out of nowhere. And it looked like a team in Bemidji State that had the experience, that's been there, that's made tournament runs over the past couple of years, and it looked like Permian Basin was in their first game. And I think that's such a beneficial thing, and we'll touch on this again in a couple of minutes here, in the experience gained from those last 2 playoff runs. Sure, you go into Colorado School of Mines after beating Augustana a couple of years ago and you get blown out, but it's experience at the very least. Like, that's what's so big about it. You kind of
understand what the hits are a little bit harder. The passes need to come a little bit quicker. Like, things just kind of move faster. Yeah, you're right.
Yep, and that's such a big thing. And again, just being able to get into the tournament, I think, is what we kind of talked about earlier this season about. That's kind of where we just want to be, like, baseline. Make the tournament. It'll be at least a successful year. You stumble a little bit more than that, and you're kind of asking questions here and there. And they did that. They made the tournament, and now they have an upset, and now they have a chance to have the best season in BSU history. And then maybe that's up in the air, because we've had, the last couple of years, maybe we had more wins.
If they get to the second round, I'll put it up there. I'm going to.
Right. Exactly. So, and I don't think anybody will really fight you too hard on that, but I think experience was a big thing in this game. And now you've given yourself more experience going forward. And it's awesome for the program to take this step, and hopefully they're not done walking yet.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff, and it's really fun, and we could spend a lot more time talking about this, and we will later in the week. So again, keep following the Beaver Banter page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, a whole bunch of different avenues that you can consume this podcast. We got an interview coming up with a Bemidji State football player that you're not going to want to miss later in the week. You'll have to keep listening to find out who that is and when that will be. Ian, let's pivot here to soccer.
Real quick.
Okay.
The other game in the bracket that we didn't touch on, Augustana.
Oh, yeah.
Dog walking Minnesota State Mankato, 51-24. So Augustana will go to Colorado to play Colorado School of Mines. And the winner of the Beavers game against Central Washington, which I believe is the Wildcats, will play the winner of that game next weekend. So just a heads up on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving pieces here. But again, Bemidji State Augustana rematch still on the table. Still on the table. Could be going back to Augustana with a chip on their shoulder. A lot's got to go right. But again, a lot of cool stuff happening. And that's been around the NSIC for at least another week. We have at least one more week of that coming up. So women's soccer gets into the NCAA tournament. We were talking about it last week and about their incredible run and about all the great things that they did. And we said playing St. Cloud State, it's going to be hard to beat a team 3 times in a row. And Bemidji State listened to that. The women's soccer team listened to that and said, you guys are bums and you don't know what you're talking about because we're going to absolutely handle St. Cloud State. And they did.
Yeah, they said, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. Not for us. Not for this team. These puppies are going to go home with their tail between their legs, and that's what they did. I mean, hey, the one gripe we had with it is, and I think that there's maybe something going on with the NCAA with this and Emporia not giving this game a broadcast crew. Maybe they just didn't have anybody. I mean,
that broadcast was very poor from like everything I've heard. Like every single broadcast what in that division was, and I get like it's up to the local SIDs who have to run this thing, and now they have to run it for like a tournament game, and you're sometimes at the mercy of student workers, which you know we all know college students can be kind of up in the air at times. But very poor for a team that got to host Division II women's soccer. You should be more prepared.
And they've been a good program. Like I think this is the 3rd year in a row that we've played them in the tournament. If I'm not
they
mistaken.
Should be prepared to have to host and have to do all this kind of stuff. They don't, from what I understand, they don't have a football team that's still running around doing stuff. Like they don't. There's no reason why that was as poor as it was. Because I think Jared Rabato of the Pioneer of the Bemidji Pioneer was he was talking about it on Twitter, and he was like, I can't even watch the game right now. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like we're all trying to figure this thing out together, and we can't watch it. And even if you get behind did anybody know? Do you have to pay for that? Like, if you paid?
No, the soccer you did not have to. That conference or whatever happened with, and that's what I was confused about. If it was up to the conference or if it's up to the NCAA, it's got to be the NCAA, at least for football, because the conference apparently was the one that lifted the paywall to be able to watch these games, and so that was free. But then, you got shoddy camera work and it's a little difficult to see what's going on. They did have a neat little corner flag or a corner camera where you could kind of watch corner kicks and the goal mouth a little bit more easily. But all the same, it was still just a little bit of a struggle. And then that's not even to touch on the fact that the broadcast just completely like kicked it for 5 minutes at the end of the Emporia State game against the Beavers in the next round. And so we just had no idea what was going on for like 5 minutes. And then we come back and, I mean, we'll talk about it, but the score was 2-1 and we're like, what, how did this happen? So, just a little bit of a disappointment from, like you said, a team that's got a good soccer program. It's not like, Minot State, that's unfair to them because they've been pretty good over the last couple of years. But you know what I'm saying? Like a team that has never been there, like Minnesota Crookston, just makes this miracle run, and they're just like, we don't know what to do now because we don't have the facilities for this or something like that. You know,
but it's still setting up a broadcast. Like you think that they would be able to.
Right.
That's because we were talking before of like, well, when Bemidji State hosted, like maybe they just only did the Bemidji State games, but you pointed out they had coverage for all the games. So I'm like, I'm a SID alum. Like they do a really good job. Bemidji State SIDs do, and the sports information department, stuff like that. They do a really good job setting up some of that stuff, and you kind of take it for granted because schools like Emporia really dropped the ball on that.
Yeah. So St. Cloud State, 1-0. They got up in the first 5 minutes. Emma Hulsnitz, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Beautiful through ball. One of the prettiest passes you'll ever see. If you haven't seen it, go scroll back on the BSU Twitter page. I might have retweeted it.
I think you did,
page, but it was just a beautiful pass, laid in there perfectly. And Sylvie Waters, with her second goal of the season, puts it away and gives the Beavers a 1-0 lead, and they hold on for another 85 minutes, just like they've done plenty of times in the past, and get the 1-0 win. And I think the bigger storyline in this game is something happened to Edie Franson, man, and she did not end up playing in this tournament. And Anna Stedman, freshman goaltender, I'm not sure if she had any minutes at all prior to this, but I know she for sure did not have a start. And if it was minutes, it would have been very limited minutes. But yeah, freshman goaltender coming in, NCAA tournament, pitching a shutout against St. Cloud State, making 7 saves. What a way to start your collegiate career for Anna Stedman. So congrats to her for coming in and doing well there. And I think, this is just another thing where you get to the next round and, they lost to Emporia State, for anybody who didn't know. But again, it's the experience. And I think that's what helped the Beavers on this entire tournament run, going on these 5 straight wins to get home field against Duluth, winning all 3 of your tournament games with all that experience. It had to be. It was a lot of experience. And now you get back into the tournament, you win another game, you're getting experience for those, like we talked about, it's a young team, it's a young core of players. And there's still the seniors that have been there, done that. And some of even the sophomores that are now stepping in have been there, done that, but maybe they just didn't have a big role on the team in the last couple of years. And now they get to have that role and they get that experience. So I think this is just a huge step for this program and kind of a little bit of a transition period between, passing of the guard between kind of the last generation of Beaver soccer players to this one. And I think it's a big thing to get into the tournament. They had a 1-0 lead against Emporia State. They scored Kenzie Hare 17 minutes into the match. And then 12 minutes later, an equalizer for Emporia State. Hannah Woolery. And then who else? Like we said, we didn't get to watch it, but Mackenzie DeMarco with her 22nd goal of the year. That was the name we said to watch going into the game. And she got the game winner, unfortunately, for the Hornets. And they will be moving on to play, I believe, Washburn College, who we just talked about in football briefly.
Yeah, and quickly to go back to your goalie conversation, I'm looking at the stats page officially on the BSU website for Anna Stedman. It looks like those are the only games she played in was the Emporia State and St. Cloud games. Those were her only 2 minutes of the or her only 2 actions of the season, and for her to only give up 2 goals throughout that set's pretty good. Just some of the kind of underrated, undernoted things or unrelated kind of information. Anna Stedman, freshman out of Little Falls High School. A previous club played for the Zolos. I think that's how you pronounce that. It's XOLOS FCMN club that went 11-6-5 in 2023. So there you go. Former Flyer, now a Beaver, and now came up in a pretty big moment. And, it's hard to tell because of the small sample size, but kind of shows where we're at with some of the depth and how talented this Bemidji State women's soccer team is through and through. We've talked about it before with some of the other players on the field, the fact that they can go through multiple kind of heads of the team and multiple cores and still be successful. And you mentioned the experience, and women's soccer team gets the valuable experience. And this isn't like when you talk about some of the playmakers for Bemidji State football, like Brandon Alt and a couple of those guys, like seniors, very experienced, and once they're gone, it's like, okay, somebody else is going to have to fill an important role next year. There are a lot of girls like sophomores and people who are going to come back next year and play some big roles again. And now they have that experience, and they just keep getting better. And this program just keeps staying on the high level that they've set. It's really, really fun to watch. And that's the fun part about college sports, is that you can watch some of these players come in and be successful and move on, and players come right in and take their spot and get to do all this. It just shows where Coach Stone has put the program and just the investment the university has made in it, and the fact of how really, really good they are. They've been consistently good for almost 8 years now, Ian?
Yeah, it's 7 or 8 at this point. I mean, even before they were making NCAA tournaments, you kind of started seeing the program.
They weren't pushovers before.
No, they weren't. And so, now this is like the 6th NCAA tournament, or 5th or 6th that they've made, 3rd in a row. So, yeah, an absolutely crazy run from this team. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon because of, like you said, if there was a time that you'd think it would be like, all right, this is kind of the make or break season, this year with all the new players that are coming in, and to be able to turn it around at the end and still get back there. And I expect this the success that this team has had to continue well into the future.
Right. It's awesome. And I guess, is there any kind of other observations from this game? I mean, from the tournament, Bemidji State got up 1-0 in that first game, and it's just kind of like, all right, they got up a goal. Like they played their style of soccer. And then that second game, they lose 2-1. Anything else just kind of stand out to you or anything kind of in this tournament, or have we kind of hit on the main beats?
Well, it was a pretty solid defensive performance throughout, and I guess if you're Anna Stedman, you can't really ask for a better defensive front to come in behind than the Beavers. They got peppered with shots. Emporia State is a team that's going to put a lot of pressure on you. They're very offensive. They put 17 shots, not on target. 8 of them found the target, and so there's a lot there, and you had to do your best with most of them. And unfortunately for us, it just didn't work out. But I think it was a very good performance from the Beavers defense, really throughout this entire tournament run. They gave up 4 to Minnesota State, and then they come through and 0-1, 0-0-0. That's 1 goal in 5 games, and that's a stellar run right there. Eventually, though, something's gonna break. Not necessarily all the time, but in this case it did, and that means the Beavers season is unfortunately over. But another successful season of Beaver soccer, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, not much you can complain about, especially considering where they were at the end of October. We kind of sat there and we talked, and we had the same conversations of like, I don't know if this team will make the tournament. They're going to have to win the conference tournament to get in, and they do. And just the things that they were able to do to get that berth and to advance. It's just again, the program's in a really, really good spot. So let's move things along with the pod here. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about the fall sports, but winter sports are rolling along here at BSU. And I think now is as good a time as any to acknowledge that Bemidji State men's hockey they're certainly playing hockey games. Like the amount of Saturday night fever games that we have witnessed or we have kind of followed along with, Ian, just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's been literally a fever dream of a Saturday night a couple weeks in a row now. I would say more so this last weekend on the road. It was the streakiest game you've ever seen. It starts off 2 Beaver goals. You're thinking, all right, they're pissed off and they're playing because they played. I mean, Friday night, they played better than the Mavericks. It's just flat out. They just didn't get the goals to go in. I think expected goals were like 3.1 to 1.8 or something in favor of the Beavers on Friday. And of course, that's hockey. That's what we say all the time. But they lose 5-1. And so it's like, damn, like we really were playing better than them. It's just the goals weren't there. And then, you come out 2 goals in the first 3 minutes, courtesy of Yuri Väisänen and Austin Jopi. 2 players that have been pretty quiet this year, so it's good to see them step up. And Eric Martin assisted on both of those. Of course, he's on the line with them, so that's to be expected. If they're getting goals, he's probably going to be getting assists. But then it was 5 straight goals by the Mavericks in the next 7 minutes of hockey, and we're like, oh, okay, this is terrible. What the heck? It's 5-2. And then freshman Jake McLean scores 12 seconds after the Mavericks put in their 5th goal and makes it 5-3. And you're like, all right, it's the first period. We're 13 minutes into this hockey game and there's 8 goals on the board. What is going on? And then it, for all intents and purposes, it kind of slowed down from there, but I mean, how could it not? Second period only had 2 goals, courtesy of Eric Polkamp on the first one, making it 5-4. And then the Beavers give up another goal late in the second. You're like, dang, are we really going to come back from a 2-goal deficit in this one on the road in the third period against the Mavericks? And I mean, for all intents and purposes, the first 12 minutes of the third period looked pretty bleak. I mean, there wasn't much pressure from the Beavers. It just didn't seem like a goal was coming. It's one of those games where you're watching it and you're like, I'm not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it. And then all of a sudden, 3 goals in 2 minutes. Jackson Jutting, Leighton Road, and Jackson Jutting again. Just insanity in the third period, winning 7-6. It was, like I said, a streaky game. 2 goals for the Beavers, 5 for the Mavericks, another 2 for the Beavers, 1 for the Mavericks, and then 3 for the Beavers. So it's just nuts. 13 goals scored in the hockey game. Defense, yeah, we've never heard of it. But
no, don't need it. Overrated.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just an exhausting game to be a part of, as a spectator. You have this emotional high in the first period where you're like, all right, let's go. The Beavs have woken up. It's Saturday night. And then, give up 5 goals in a row. Maybe I spoke too soon.
You ever see it? It's the meme that made its way around during Vikings games a lot last season, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. It's the oh boy, I can't wait to watch my favorite hockey team, and the middle is like, I'm going to jump into Lake Bemidji, and then the end part is, oh nice, we won.
Yeah, no, it's like, oh hey, it ended up working out for us. Yeah, I mean, like I said, dude, Friday night was a pretty good game for the Beavers. It was just a couple of goals early, and then Eric Polkamp pulled one back, and it was 2-1. And you kind of thought, all right, we've been playing better than them. Maybe we can show back up. And then a minute and a half later, the Mavs score, make it 3-1. A couple minutes later, it's 4-1, and then they get an empty netter. It's like, all right, that sucked. And it's kind of been the story of the season for the Beavers, where it's like, even in a lot of these games where they're losing, they're kind of outplaying their opponents, and it's just not working. And it's probably something to do with goaltending. Rathan Robbins got the start on Saturday and got pulled after, I think, the fourth goal given up, or the fifth. Maybe it was the fifth. Maybe he got just left in there. But goaltending just has not worked since Matthias Scholl has exited the lineup for the Beavers. So we need Matthias back because it's been not good. The Beavers are averaging like 5 goals allowed a game, like 4.5 goals allowed a game over the last month. It's been ugly. 4 to Lake Superior State, 5 to Lake Superior State, 4 and 4 to Michigan Tech, and now 5 and 6 to Minnesota State. That's not going to cut it, especially now when you have to go on the road to Ralph Engelstad Arena and play the number 1 team in the country. And of course, there's the number 1 team. They call it the curse of being number 1 this year, because I don't think anybody stayed number 1 for more than 1 week. Michigan State just went into, or I think it was at Munn Ice Arena in East Lansing, but Wisconsin just got swept by Michigan State. So that's their first couple of, other than I think the North Dakota game that Wisconsin lost, that's their first sweep of the year, getting swept. So maybe the Beavers can pull off some magic on Saturday night again and win one of the most chaotic games you've ever seen. But it's going to be a tall task. North Dakota, I mean, they've just completely overhauled their defensive core, and they look amazing. Like, it's unbelievable what they've been able to do with like a completely new defensive situation there in Grand Forks. So I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and predict a sweep for North Dakota. The Beavers just have not fared well out of conference, especially this season, with, your best result probably being an overtime loss to Wisconsin. So, I mean, hey, maybe it's a hedge bet where you expect the worst and then you're happy if something goes a little bit right. So hopefully the Beavers can pick up any sort of pairwise movement in this game. Not that I think it'll matter in the grand scheme of things, even if you take one of these games off North Dakota. I don't think the team is necessarily going to play consistently enough to get an at-large berth at the end of the year regardless. So that doesn't necessarily matter, but it'll make the fan base feel good, and it'll be something like last year. What was St. Cloud State ranked? Like number 2 in the country when we beat them?
Yeah, they were top 5 for sure.
Yeah, of course that game was at home, and neither of these will be at home. But so it'll be a little bit of an interesting weekend, I'm sure, as it always is with this team. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the 7 goals and the 6 goals, and like all that's really, really fun. And I don't want to take anything away from like the team for coming back on those games, but also winning those games aren't sustainable. Like to be doing that all the time, and you can't give up 4, even 5 goals a game and expect to win. They've kind of gotten bailed out.
Is it not though? Because we've had a big comeback once in every weekend since that Lake State game. I mean, we didn't win, but we came back from a 3-0 hole against Lake State.
That's
and then
true.
We come back twice. So is it sustainable?
Well, I mean, imagine if you just gave up like 1 less goal and then your season's looking at it's again. Right. I know they have injuries in net, and I get that that's the issue. And
it's not the entire thing though. The defense has looked pretty atrocious. I'm not going to.
You can make a goaltender who's being asked to play out of position look really bad when you kind of hang him out to dry. And that's what the defense has done in a little bit of these situations. But I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, and who knows how long, we're going to get Scholl back. Like, that's obviously injuries in college sports. They can basically just not tell you anything, and they're under no obligation to give you any information, because why would they if they don't have to? And that's kind of the thing. We have no idea how long he's going to be out for. They're not even going to say like, oh yeah, we expect him to come back this day. Like it's going to be all of a sudden one weekend. It's, oh yeah, hey, he's playing this weekend, by the way. And who knows if they're going to wait until after Christmas. Like, I don't know. I have no idea how long. Like, we have no kind of bearings at all in this situation. So anyway, really with this team though, I mean, going into the Ralph, it's always a tough place to play as we've talked about before. I've said the story, I think, before on the podcast, but I'll say it one more time. When I was in high school, me and my younger brother went to like a basketball camp and at UND, because I was just one of them that was hosting it. I think like my brother's friend was going and I just kind of tagged along, whatever. It was in high school. I remember one of the players was like walking us around the facility, walked through the locker rooms at the Bemidji State Arena, which is the basketball court. And we kind of walked through, and they're like connected kind of, I think, or like they're pretty close, or I can't remember what the deal was. But he kind of like talked a little bit about some of the stuff. And like he kind of showed us the locker rooms, and he kind of was like, yeah, here's this, here's that. And then he just kind of stops like, yeah, it kind of takes an S on the Betty, really. Talking about the Ralph Engelstad Arena, and just kind of like, like it's a nice little basketball court we got here. We got everything we pretty much need for a small D1 program, but yeah, we pretty much don't get the time of day compared to that hockey rink for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's crazy. All the tours that they'll take, like you'll see the TikTokers or people on Twitter that post we're touring the Ralph today, but like let's take a look around. This video board costs $3.8 trillion. Yeah, it's nice that you could put a video board in, and you had to cut your women's hockey program in the process.
There was no money. There was no money.
There was no money left over. No, we have no more money.
Nothing. By the way, a weird connection for you Twins fans out there. Matt Wallner of Forest Lake, Minnesota, he was a commit to UND baseball. Yeah, and he was up there on a visit, and they cut the program. So he lost the scholarship. He's a grad of 2016 like me. So
they don't have a baseball program either?
No, because Title IX, they had to cut him. They had to cut a men's sport.
Yeah, and they're in the mud, dude.
Yes, they had to cut a men's sport. So they cut baseball because that has roughly around the same amount of people as a women's hockey team would. And also it's Grand Forks, so you're not going to really play baseball. It's like Bemidji, you're not going to play baseball until May anyway. So so he goes to Southern Miss and eventually gets drafted by the Twins. But like the whole joke is that like, okay, well, I guess
it's the best thing that ever happened to him.
Best thing that ever happened to him. We didn't have to live in Grand Forks. I mean, come on. But yeah, so anyway, good chance to dump on UND, which is always good. Ralph Engelstad, I've heard the story from somebody who used to kind of be involved with hockey at UND, was like Ralph Engelstad got his money because he just owned a bunch of land in Nevada before Las Vegas got really big. So he just kind of sold off that real estate, and that's how he got, I don't know how he acquired the land. I don't know why. I don't know whatever. But that guy apparently had a bunch of land. He had a bunch of sand, and apparently was worth something to somebody. And now some dude in North Dakota had enough money to build a giant hockey rink that for the life of me will just be around until the end of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's quite a few
there's quite a few stories about Ralph Engelstad that we probably just should refrain from on the podcast. We'll avoid that. He was a big collector of some paraphernalia. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so
real quick before we move on from men's hockey, unless you had anything to add, I guess just
I think let's just bash UND one more time, just for UND sucks. They're terrible city, terrible stadium, terrible fans, terrible owner. You know the whole bit.
All right.
Yeah.
So a couple splits across the conference this weekend. Bowling Green split with Lake Superior State. Ferris State splits with Michigan Tech. So just a brief.
A lot of parity in this conference still.
Yeah, it's going to be up in the air until like the final weekend. But as of right now, the Beavers are back on top of the conference. And of course, they played more games than like every other team in the conference. But we're not going to look at that number. We're only going to look at the number under what says PTS, guys. That's 13, and nobody else has more than 12. So we'll just keep it at that, and we'll move along onto another hockey team.
That's going to require that somebody's going to have to sweep this weekend to get overtime. Like, there's still a realistic chance that after this weekend, Bemidji State will still be in a good spot.
Maybe.
I'm gonna be confident.
Yes, but the women's team, they also deserve some flowers. They got their first win
They
of the
do.
season against Minnesota State Mankato. It was an overtime win, horns down, absolutely. I got a brief segment at the very end of the show about horns down. It's 30 seconds long, but
Okay,
yeah, it
perfect.
was a 2-0 lead for the Beavers. They give up 2 goals in the third period because, I mean, the third period's just been the bane of their existence this year. And then they get an overtime winner, courtesy of Taylor Nelson, 14 seconds into the overtime period. So kind of the polar opposite of when the men go to overtime, with a immediate collapse on the men's side in overtime against Minnesota Duluth. And then the Beavers women's team ends up winning in 14 seconds. So Taylor Hendrickson, Haley Armstrong, and Taylor Nelson with the goals on Friday night in the win. And then they unfortunately dropped a 3-2 overtime game on Saturday night. But Haley Armstrong with another goal and Chloe Lund with another goal, both on the power play. So, and then there was very quickly, Lund and Armstrong also tabbed WCHA Players of the Week after split with Minnesota State. So congrats to them. Most successful weekend of the year so far, and hopefully you can kind of build on it. They are off yet again this weekend, and then the following weekend they go to Ritter Arena to play against the University of Minnesota, who I'm sure is not ranked highly at all in women's hockey. But
No. Why would they be?
yeah, so credit to the women's hockey team for getting off the slide there, getting a win, and getting some WCHA points.
Yeah, exactly. You get that win. Again, it's a young team. And for them to just get that win and at least be like, oh, thank goodness. Like we got that one off the board, kind of move on, and you get to do that. Important. They're gonna go through the rest of the season, but it's important to get that opportunity when it's there. By the way, one last thing we forgot to mention with men's hockey, second week in a row that Kyle Luft has been named the CCHA Defensive Man of the Week.
Yep, I did forget about that. I was going to bring that up, and I knew it. I was like, if I don't open this tab, I'm going to forget about it. And
we got distracted in the UND slander. That's okay.
I think it's the third total Defensive Player of the Week this year for Kyle Luft. Luft.
Yeah, Luft.
I hear it pronounced so many different ways on different broadcasts that I like.
Do you like really accentuate the double O like Luft?
The only one that I know isn't true is what Lake State called him, which was Kyle Luft. And I'm like, where do you get the U from, buddy? But yeah, so congrats to Kyle. He's had a phenomenal season. I think he had another like 4 or 5 point weekend. Just nuts production from a defenseman. He and Polkamp are lighting up the offensive scoreboard.
Yeah, it's been really cool to get to see that, and to get to see that recognition throughout the conference is also really good. We haven't had I know it's already, we've been in the season for like a month, but we still haven't yeah, there's not that many weeks though. To get 3 of them already is a pretty good sign for him. So, all right, Ian, let's wrap things up talking about basketball. And for men's basketball, you had the pleasure of watching the men's basketball team take on Oak Hills Christian College. And I've seen those games firsthand from having to take stats for them. And let me tell you, they're crazy because, one, there's just a lot of scoring because Bemidji State's a Division II college basketball team. They're going to score over 100 points almost every single time. And the other one is like, that team is just guys who are like, well, we're supposed to lose anyway, so let's just go jack up some threes and let's go. Like, it's entertaining, but like towards the end, and like this is, if you're Boshi for Bemidji State, you have to like, okay, like let's make sure we rein this in towards the end of the game and things don't get kind of too wild. That's not like trying to insinuate that anybody's being dirty or chippy or anything. It's just, I mean, like, you know, like when a team is like better than another team, you can sometimes like go down to their level a little bit, or like things get out of hand and you kind of just get lost in the zaniness. And that sometimes is what happens when you play Oak Hills. And Bemidji State got the triple-digit mark.
Yeah, and I believe they also, I mean, they did that. Northland College feels like an eternity ago. I think it was like it was like an hour after we recorded our last podcast, so it probably had already ended by the time that people heard the podcast. But they also put up triple digits against them. Yeah, it was kind of a tune-up game for, like you said, for Boshi, figuring out what the rotations are going to be, giving a lot of guys. There's in the game against Oak Hills, nobody played more than 20 minutes, and that was Dalton Albrecht, who hit 20 minutes. Everybody else 16, 14, 15, 12, 15, 13. So it's a very balanced minute total. So it's a lot of getting guys in, getting them involved. And I think, you know, even from these small sample sizes, you can kind of see what Bemidji State's going to do. It's going to be Albrecht and it's going to be Sutherland. And then it's going to be which guard is going to step up and have his night tonight. That's going to be what the main thing is, because Albrecht played out of his mind, 20 and 16 against Oak Hills. It was just like you kind of felt bad for the Oak Hills guys out there just getting bodied by those big posts for Bemidji State. But yeah, a dominant 112-31 victory. It was, yeah, I didn't really watch much of it, especially after about the first 10 minutes or so.
You kind of realize what that basketball game is going to be, and you're like, okay, I can have this on in the background, but I don't need to be intently
right. It was 65-15 at halftime, and I think at one point in that game the score was 9-8, and so I was like, oh god, it was just brutal the amount of scoring that they did. I can find it here because it was 13-9 at one point, and then it ends up being 65-15 at halftime. It's like, oh, okay, well,
all right. Well, we're here.
This may have gotten a little out of hand.
Just maybe. Yeah, that's why you put those teams on the schedule. Why you put Northland coming over pretty much from Ashland. That's why you have Oak Hills come across and play you. Mm-hmm. And now Bemidji State is going to be playing in the Eckerd College Thanksgiving Classic down in St. Petersburg, Florida. So they're going to be down in Tampa Bay pretty much. They're going to play Tampa University on Friday at 6 o'clock. And then on Saturday, they're going to play Eckerd at 6 o'clock as well. And then you get into next week. And then we're into the NSIC portion of the schedule. So one more non-conference weekend before we dive into things fully, the meat and potatoes of the NSIC schedule, as we always like to call it. But really just kind of going down to this tournament, it's non-conference play. Just go and I'll be honest, I know nothing about Tampa or Eckerd, so that's who they got this week.
I know that Tampa is a city in Florida. That's all I know about that word. So yeah.
All I know is that the Tampa's mascot looks like a Spartan or a Centurion or something like that. They're not the Reddies, so they lose my vote. Exactly. They're going to lose. Yeah. So anyway, women's basketball, they get things going a little bit here as their season has kind of gotten at least steered right with that win against Minnesota Morris. They win 71-50, kind of bouncing back from that 63-52 loss to Mayville State last week. They played on Saturday, 2 p.m. at the BSU Gymnasium. They get the 21-point win, and now their non-conference schedule quickly is wrapped up, and we get they have one non-conference game at the end of December against Valley City, and that's it for their non-conference schedule. So they jump in to NSIC play this weekend. They're hosting 2 weeks from now, right? Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
You're right. 2 weeks from now. I was going to say, that doesn't feel right because Bemidji State's they have travel partners with that kind of stuff. So they get a week off here, and to kind of tune things up, there's a certain train of thought where it's let's take a week, let's get everybody tuned up and get ready to go. And then there's also the let's also just play a game because we need to get some minutes to figure some things out on the court. There's only so much you can practice without games, especially early in the season where you're I don't know, I think I have an idea, but I don't know. So, whatever, that's going to be where they're at. They get a little bit of break before they jump right into the schedule, and we'll preview that a little bit more next week. But theoretically, you have Crookston and Minot on the schedule. There's something you can do there. We'll have to see. But Ian, as we wrap this thing up, you have your little story you wanted to tell.
Yeah. Just a quick heads up, by the way, the NSIC announced today. We'll touch on this maybe more once things calm down. Because right now we're approaching an hour and we didn't even get to touch on it. But the NSIC has extended an official invitation to the University of Jamestown, something that we brought up earlier this season when it was
first podcast of the season. Yeah.
Yep. So that's kind of exciting, getting back up to a potential 16 teams. It will not happen until July 1st of 2025. So not obviously this season during the middle of the sports seasons, and then not even next season, but it would be a couple years out. And
they're currently NAIA, right?
Yes, they are NAIA. Yeah. So there's still a lot to figure out there. They have to get accepted by the NCAA as a Division II team, but just keep your eye out for that. And like I said, we'll touch a little bit more on that when things calm down, if we feel it's right. But I just wanted to touch and tell anybody out there who knows any Maverick fans to just give them a hug and make sure that you whisper in their ear, you did this to yourself, but call me rent-free, call me whatever you want, but it was an absolutely brutal weekend. It's been a brutal couple of weeks to be a Maverick fan. Look at their football
You just
team.
hate to see it.
Losing to the University of Minnesota Duluth.
Getting steamrolled.
Then the next week, and your season ends with 2 straight losses against Augustana and Minnesota Duluth, and now your season is over. The soccer team losing in the first round of the NSIC tournament, getting upset by, I believe, Concordia St. Paul in that tournament, and then losing again in the first round to, I think, Central Missouri of the NCAA tournament. The volleyball team eliminated on the final weekend of the regular season, just like Bemidji's was, to be fair. But then you give the BSU women's hockey team their first win of the season in overtime, and you collapse on your home ice against the men's hockey team and allow a 3-goal comeback in the last 7 minutes of the game. So unbelievable. And it's great to be able to troll the Mavs a little bit, especially when the Beavs are particularly on a hot one right now.
Yeah. It just couldn't happen to nicer people. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does, Mankato, they're the great sports city of the state. Just ask them. They'll tell you how great they are. We talk about this with Duluth, and they kind of like the superiority complex that UMD kind of has. But, Mankato has it too a little bit. They act like they're this pristine sports program, especially when it comes to hockey. And they blew a lead to the Beavers, and at home for them, by the way.
I think the nuanced difference between those two is that the Mavs fans are a little bit more brash about it. They're up in your face. They're
not like a high. They're like a Philly sports, there's a high society.
They're the Philadelphia of the state of Minnesota.
You got to grease the street poles in Mankato,
Yeah, and with Duluth, it's kind of they think they're in some sort of a high society where it's just nobody's really on our level. I'm not even gonna. I'm
not even going to dignify that with a response.
Yeah. So that's kind of the nuanced little difference between those two cities in Minnesota. But I think that about wraps it up.
I think we've trash talked enough schools. Yeah.
Who else wants some? Moorhead, what are you guys doing? Nothing? I didn't think so.
No, I didn't think so. Moorhead, we have the Axe right here, right in our vicinity. Is right at the Chet where there's actually trees. You don't get to have an Axe in a place where there's no trees. There you go. Who can we St. Cloud, we already took a good bite out of them last week.
Any sport that's not played on the ice, we have beaten St. Cloud every time in. So
yeah, well, if St. Cloud State ever wants to brag, you just remind them. You tell them all right, cool. We'll remember that next time our football teams play.
Exactly.
We'll get you back there. Anyway, so, all right, we have a podcast coming up later in the week. Be sure to keep an eye out for that. We're going to talk with a Bemidji State football player. Not going to want to miss it. We're pretty excited to do this interview, especially considering where the football program is at right now. Stay tuned in for later in the week. Be following our Facebook page, Twitter page, YouTube page, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been another episode of Beaver Banter.